With more than 6,000 small and microcap companies listed, if you're looking for the next apple at the earliest stage, then channelchek truly is the orchard. The listed companies support channelchek, so it's free for you, the potential investor, to gain access to institutional quality research from FINRA licensed analysts, advanced market data, industry reports, news, and a growing catalog of videos and webcasts. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and register for channelchek so you're always up to date on what's going on at the small and microcap data place. Welcome to the C-Suite series presented by channelchek and Noble Capital Markets. Noble is an SEC-registered, FINRA-licensed broker-dealer and the source of the equity research available on channelchek. Today's interview features Lineage Cell Therapeutics, NYSE ticker symbol LCTX. Noble Senior Research Analyst Robert LeBoyer interviews Lineage CEO Brian Culley. Visit channelchek.com or click the link in the description for Noble's research on Lineage Cell Therapeutics, as well as news and advanced market data. And now, here's Robert and Brian.
I'm Robert LeBoyer, Senior Biotechnology Analyst at Noble Capital. With me today is Brian Culley, CEO of Lineage Cell Therapies. The company has a cellular-based therapy, and here with me to tell us about it is Brian. Can you start by telling us about the core technology and how it's different from other companies developing cell therapies?
Yeah, hi Rob. I'm happy to talk about Lineage today. So before I start, as a public company, I may be making some forward-looking statements, and so people can learn about our risk factors and through our filings at the sec.gov. So thanks for having me to have an opportunity to talk about the business. So our technology is based upon the use of whole cells and transplanting whole cells to treat various diseases and conditions. We do that because there are some settings for which traditional medicine, small molecules or antibodies, they might not have the horsepower to be able to deliver the maximum possible benefit compared to transplanting whole cells. So much like a bone marrow transplant, which has been done for decades, is very successful at replacing the activity of the bone marrow, we grow specific types of cells, and then we transplant those specific types of cells into a patient's body in order to restore or regenerate activity. And I'm sure we'll get into exactly how we do that, but the basic technology is using the power of a whole cell and all of the activity of the cell in order to replace activity that's lost through aging or disease or even accidents.
Could you describe whether these will be off-the-shelf products or personalized for each individual patient?
Yeah, that's a very important distinction. So cell therapy as a field has received some notoriety, mostly in the setting of cancer, where the most common application of cell therapy is to take cells from a patient, manipulate them in some way, and then put them back in. That's fine. We've seen some really remarkable findings in clinical trials with that approach. But it's incredibly expensive because you really are developing a customized therapy, a bespoke therapy for each individual. So what we do, and the only thing that we do, are allogeneic approaches, meaning we're not taking cells from a patient and putting them back in. We actually grow cell lines into tremendous number, many billions of cells, and then we freeze small amounts of those off, and they can be used in any patient. And that's called an allogeneic approach. And we think that that's very important because the economics of scale, ultimately the price, the affordability, and the access to these therapies can really only be successful if you have an off-the-shelf solution or an allogeneic solution, unless you're going to be charging many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So those price points might work in cancer today, and that's okay, and that's where you see that application. But when you start thinking about other conditions and other areas which maybe can't tolerate these customized, personalized approaches, then you've got to have a solution that can be used for everyone. So everything that we do is developing these cells that are frozen and can be pulled off the shelf out of I call it off the shelf, but it's really out of a frozen state. They're frozen down, and you pull those cells out and you thaw them, and just a few minutes later they're going into a needle and injected into the patient. And that, I think, is really going to be the future of this field of medicine as we move away from custom solutions and get into something that it can be enjoyed by everyone with a particular disease or condition.
And in terms of the manufacturing process, this sounds like you have some proprietary methods for making these cells and would need manufacturing capacity. Are those things in place right now?
Yeah, in many cases, the answer is yes. So for our most advanced program, which is treating a kind of blindness, we manufacture a special kind of retina cell. And what we do is we grow the cells on these very small micro carriers. They're like beads, and they're floating around in a liquid container. And so, for example, in a 3-liter bioreactor, so this is basically a container about the size of a jug of milk, we're able to grow 5 billion what's called RPE cells, or this specialized retina cell. So that equates to about 2,500 courses of therapy from just a milk jug. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, certainly if you're doing custom therapy, right, that 2,500 times better is no small feat. But even with some of these cell therapies where they're still growing cells in 2 dimensions, meaning growing cells on plastic plates, you might need a football field or a soccer pitch worth of plastic, in order to have enough 2-dimensional surface area. We do all of our growth and expansion in 3 dimensions. And the nice thing there is it provides better control and better reproducibility of the conditions by which we grow the cells. And that's something that, of course, FDA is going to be interested in, to have good control and reproducibility of your clinical material and ultimately of your commercial material. And the nice thing is that the cells, when they're growing, they don't know if they're in, a container the size of a shot glass or a container the size of a swimming pool, right? They're just sticking onto these little beads and growing. And so it provides us with an opportunity to be able to scale even beyond the levels we're at, and to be able to provide commercial levels at an affordable price point by taking advantage of these unique cells and how we develop them.
Wow, so it sounds as if you have a manufacturing process that has very strict controls and specifications. You can make large quantities that can serve large markets at reasonable costs. So that sounds like a great technology. The first application is, as you mentioned, in the retina, and your OpRegen product is being tested in age-related macular degeneration. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, OpRegen, it's going to be short for ophthalmology regeneration. And so OpRegen it describes a treatment where we inject about 100,000 RPE cells. Now, RPE cells are part of your retina. They're responsible for things like eliminating waste. They help support the photoreceptors that are obviously responsible or critical for your ability to see things. So the retina cells are very important, but in certain conditions, and in particular a condition of aging, sometimes these retina cells die off. And nobody really knows why they start to die off. And this is most frequently a condition of people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. You're basically outliving your retina cells. And the typical course of this disease is that the cells die sort of, in one little spot in the back of your retina. And then, all those dead cells, they're releasing, sort of toxic elements, and they start to sort of kill off the neighboring cells. And this little spot, or this little dot of cell death, can begin to expand, and it gets larger and larger. And as it expands, it starts to wipe out, or it becomes atrophic is the word. It's a geographic atrophy. It starts to wipe out the area that you rely on for vision. And so people will experience loss of central vision. You'd be looking as you are at your screen right now, and you'd see a black spot or a smudge over my face. You might be able to see this stuff in the periphery, but you can't really see who you're talking to. Eventually, this leads to total blindness. And so this is a really terrible disease, and our approach is to manufacture brand new RPE cells and inject them into the eye to replace the ones that have died off and to take over the functions and activities of those cells. And in doing so, we're really excited that we've seen patients that have not just been able to preserve their existing vision, but actually gain some vision that they had lost. And we've seen some really incredible changes to the anatomy in the back of the eye. We might get into that, but basically our approach is making new parts and injecting them into the patient so that their eye can run properly again.
Yeah, it sounds almost as if you're patching the damage with new cells and restoring both function and eliminating the loss of vision.
Yeah,
So,
that's absolutely our approach. You're missing something. You're missing retina cells. Here's some new ones. If your car was missing an accelerator, right? Here's a new pedal so that you can drive safely. It's sort of I'm oversimplifying by about a millionfold, but that really is the underlying principles of regenerative medicine. And we are trying to be one of the leaders in regenerative medicine, and this is our lead program today.
the current therapies for age-related macular degeneration are the anti-VEGF injections. Could you compare what you're doing with this current standard?
Yeah, this is actually sort of a remarkable aspect of this story. Macular degeneration exists in two forms. Those forms are called the wet and the dry form. I know you're familiar with this, but for the listeners, there are therapies for wet AMD. Those therapies are mostly the anti-VEGFs, and they are wildly successful in a commercial market. I mean, there are more than 10 billion with a B dollars of sales for anti-VEGF therapies. But there are no FDA-approved therapies for the dry form, right? The approved therapies today are only for wet AMD. There's nothing approved. We have no treatments for dry form, dry AMD. You and I were speaking earlier. You mentioned, I hope I'm not divulging too much, your dad has dry AMD. My dad also has dry AMD. This is a common therapy, and what our dads get told when they go to see the specialist is, I'm sorry, you have dry AMD, sir. And then you say, okay, doc, what can you do for it? And they say, nothing. You shouldn't smoke, and you should eat lots of vegetables and take your vitamins. There's no therapy for this condition. And incredibly, the overwhelming majority of people with macular degeneration do not have wet AMD for which there's a therapy. That 80 to 90% of people with macular degeneration actually have the dry form for which there's no therapy. So it's quite incredible that the commercial environment for wet AMD supports $10 billion of product sales, but yet no one has been able to unlock what's going on in dry AMD. And so we're hoping to be the first to be able to have a therapy that actually affects this disease, because it really would likely to us be a huge success.
Yes, and there are drugs to stop the growth of new capillaries in 10% of the people, but nothing that stops the degeneration from the aging process in the other 80 to 90%. So
Yeah.
they just live with less central vision and don't drive at night and just live with it.
Yeah, it's really a horrible disease. It doesn't get as much attention as probably some of the other things that are out there, but when you talk to people about their loss of vision, it's like they're losing their sense of self. I mean, you lose your independence. You can't engage with the outside world because you're not able to see your children's videos. You can't look at what's going on your phone. You can't read a book. I mean, these people are, they're dying in a way that's not actual death, right? They're just losing independence, and there's no solution. And it's been kind of incredible. We've done some patient highlight videos talking about people who are on our clinical trial and their experience with regaining some vision and what it means to them. It's incredibly powerful. And I think that, it hasn't been for lack of trying. I mean, people have tried to treat dry AMD. It's not a new condition. We've known about it forever. The problem is the traditional approaches, the small molecules and antibodies and things like that, they haven't worked. And what we think the problem is that when cells are dying, taking a molecule or an antibody and trying to affect one little pathway, it's probably inadequate or insufficient. You know, if you've got a cell that's dying with all of its billions of little, you know, molecules inside of it, so many things are going wrong that we don't happen to believe that you can just, you know, pop a pill and fix that problem. We think that that problem is so, the magnitude of it is so large that you really need a wholesale replacement approach. And that's why we're really encouraged by what we're seeing. We think that for the first time, by using the transplant of whole cells, you might be able to alter the course of this disease in a way that, you know, is going to actually make a difference to the patient.
Yeah, like you said, this is something that's just been accepted as part of aging. Cataracts, hearing aids, loss of vision from AMD have just been accepted as part of aging, but it doesn't need to be. And there's a huge number of people that can benefit from your therapy.
Yeah, I think that's right. We estimate about 1.8 million people in this country have dry AMD with geographic atrophy, the problem I described of the death of cells.
And one of the other applications that is very interesting and tremendous value to be added is in spinal cord injury and remyelination of nerves. Can you tell us a little bit about that program?
Yeah, this has some parallels, right? If you just keep in mind that what Lineage does is we manufacture cells that you've lost and transplant those to your body. In the setting of spinal cord injury, you know, whether this is you know, a car accident, which is fairly common, or you know, all the mountain biking and the surfing accidents, even things like you know, sometimes surgical procedures go wrong. What happens typically is you have some sort of an area of injury to the spinal cord itself, and human beings don't have the ability to regenerate the spinal tissue, so you're left essentially with a hole, right? There's damage, there's inflammation, there's scarring, and you're left with this dysfunctional area. Well, if you think about what the function of your spinal cord is to connect messages from your brain to your, you know, to your extremities. So if there's a hole in the spinal cord, those signals, those electrical impulses, they can't jump across a chasm, right? They can't jump a gap. Electrons don't do that. You need some material there to carry the message. So we manufacture the cells that are typically present there. They're called oligodendrocyte progenitors. And these are the cells that manufacture the insulation, right? So it's not just enough to put the wires down. You have to insulate those wires. Otherwise, the nerves won't be able to fire in a coordinated manner, right? You don't want spastic movement. You want to be able to say, I want to, you know, grab a cup and hold it. So what we do is first we grow huge numbers of these pluripotent cells, and then we give them a different set of instructions, and we ask them to become oligodendrocyte progenitors, and then we transplant oligodendrocyte progenitors into a patient's spinal cord. And what we're trying to do is give them that substance or that substrate from which they can regain electrical connectivity, and through that connectivity they can regain motion. And that's the objective here. And we're focusing in the upper extremities. We want to be able to help people to be able to get enough motion to be able to operate their own wheelchairs, to be able to feed themselves, to be able to paint or type. This is a really amazing area because, again, it's a setting where you don't have anything approved by the FDA, and you don't have any success with traditional approaches like small molecules and antibodies, right? It's an area of injury, it's a wound, just like we had a wound in the eye, it's a wound in the spinal cord, and maybe small molecules and antibodies can't get the job done. Maybe you need to transplant tissue into that area, and by doing so, you can regain some activity. And that's what we've seen in the clinic. We've seen signs of activity in these patients that are, you know, following their injury.
Yeah, like you said, there's scar tissue and there's an injury that prevents the transmission of the impulse. So by providing the cells, you can patch that damage and restore function.
Yeah, I like that you said patch. I sometimes jokingly say we're spackling the spinal cord. So yeah, that's basically what it is. Again, oversimplified a millionfold, but that's the approach.
That's the basic concept here. And just in spinal cord injury, the cost of caring for a patient in spinal cord injury, not only the wheelchair and all of the immediate medical expenses, but the hospitalizations from infection and consequences of being immobile, plus the cost of custodial care, feeding, and all of those things is enormous. So that I would think that if you can restore any function at all and give these people back some independence, it's not only good for them as individuals, it would also save costs for the medical system. So it's a win-win for the patient and the system.
Yeah, these costs can run as high as $5 million, right? If someone needs around-the-clock care, someone needs to feed them, someone needs to clothe them, someone needs to wipe them after they're using the restroom. I mean, all of these have huge expenses. Transportation, specialty equipment to get around, infections, or all the other complications that come with being immobilized. There is a tremendous financial offset if you can regain clinically meaningful independence and mobility for these individuals. I really like to focus on the social side of it. There's a huge financial side of it, clearly, but even more so the social side, talking to, what are typically young guys, right? I mean, this is who gets a spinal cord injury more often. It's sort of a youngish male. And what's amazing to me and what's really striking is that nobody expects it, right? Any of us could suffer from a spinal cord injury, but nobody expects it to happen to them. Now, if you smoke 5 packs of cigarettes a day for 20 years and you get lung cancer, maybe you think you saw that one coming, but nobody expects a spinal cord injury. So we're talking with kids that, there's 23-year-old boys who, they've had their lives taken away, and they say, boy, if you could just get me a little mobility, if I could just move my wrist, right, so that I can operate my own wheelchair, the level of independence that they can gain, it's really incredible. It's very moving. So yeah, this is just another example of Lineage trying to operate in areas that are under-addressed, where small molecules maybe can't get the job done. And it's just been incredibly rewarding to see early signs of an effect in these patient populations, whether the elderly on the blindness or whether the younger people with the spinal cord injuries.
Yes, and in your slide deck, one of the things that you show is that the main causes are automobile accidents and sports injuries. So that's young men who are active and have their entire lives ahead of them. So not only the social aspect that you mentioned, but as a financial analyst looking for shareholders, the value of this is enormous.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
The value of giving people back productivity and function.
Yeah, and I mean, they're individuals are robbed of their lives, right? A woman's going into the hospital to give birth. It's a routine, routine process. An epidural. Something went wrong with the epidural. Now you have a spinal cord injury. You can't move your legs, right? What happened? It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, and now she's a paraplegic. So yeah, the stories are really incredible. So we feel very honored to be working in this space as well as in the blindness area.
And the third major area that you're in development now is in cancer and the immunology of the cancer response. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a variation on the theme we've been talking about today. In this case, what we are doing is we're manufacturing a certain kind of immune cell called dendritic cell. The role of the dendritic cell in your body is to present little pieces of foreign information to your immune system so that your immune system can become educated about what is foreign, right? So dendritic cells can help identify cancerous tissue or cancerous cells so that your body's immune system, your T cells, can wipe it out. Typically, we're not talking about people who are depleted in dendritic cells and we're replacing those dendritic cells. In this case, what we're doing is we're just piling on. We're just adding 50, 60 million additional dendritic cells. And we pre-package these dendritic cells with a little piece of information. So if you think about, this is like a vaccine approach, really. If you think about how vaccines work, and we're all experts now in vaccines thanks to COVID, but the way that it works is you need to get a little piece of information to the T cells. So we take that little bit of information, we pre-package it in dendritic cells, and we put those dendritic cells in the patient. So now the patient has tens of millions of messengers running around with the warning sign saying, all right, if you see this, go kill it. And so it's sort of like an immune system. I hate to say booster, but it's, you know, it's an enhancer. It's really making sure that your body's immune system is educated and informed as to what a foreign invader looks like, so that, and that foreign invader in this case is cancer, so that the immune system can help wipe out those cancerous cells.
And one of the other areas of cancer therapy today that would fit in with what you're doing are the checkpoint inhibitors and the immuno-oncology drugs. Do you see some potential for combination?
Yeah, I do. Dendritic cells as monotherapy may have a place, but mechanistically, there's probably an even more compelling opportunity if you can combine them with checkpoint inhibitors. And just to explain that for a little bit, checkpoint inhibitors are really about trying to knock down the defenses of a tumor. And we're operating on the other side of the equation, right? We're boosting. So, you know, if you think of this in terms of the accelerator and the brake in a vehicle, if you only accelerate, you know, you're only getting half of it. If you only brake, you're only getting half of it. What we're trying to do with checkpoint inhibitors in combination is we think that if you use the checkpoint inhibitor to reduce the tumor's defenses, and then you use the dendritic cell vaccine to boost your immunological offenses, now we think that you can get maximum clinical outcomes by using those two approaches in combination.
One of the things about the checkpoint inhibitors is that they're very effective when they work, but only between 10 and 30% of the tumors will respond because they lack the immune cells to carry out the killing step. So what you're doing would fit in very well with what the established mechanism is, and boost that response and lead to better outcomes.
Yeah, that's right. It's a notion of, you know, hot tumors and cold tumors, you know, which ones are going to respond and which ones won't. The exciting thing for us is that the field of dendritic cell vaccines has already shown that approach can work, right? There are therapies based upon dendritic cell vaccination that have been approved by FDA. So we have some clinical precedent for this approach, and we're seeing all the time, often in academic circles, more and more evidence that dendritic cells can work. So, you know, we're kind of going around the cycle, right? People are using T cells, they're now using NK cells, they're moving into macrophages. We're trying to be a little forward thinking and be ready to have a nice allogeneic, right, off the shelf solution for dendritic cells. And that's something that to our knowledge, no one else has made it quite as far as we have in the clinic with this approach.
Okay, and having covered the general technology and the three main areas, can you tell us a little bit about the milestones ahead for the company and things that we can look for the balance of the year, and maybe even touch on some of the financial aspects of the company?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. I mean, you know, in March we had reported, I think 55 million. So the company is well capitalized in order to reach some of our near-term milestones, which include next month in July. We're going, or maybe that's this month by the time this runs, but we're going to be reporting 6-month data for at least 6 months, 6 months minimum on all patients for our macular degeneration program. So that's a very near-term event. We also plan to meet with FDA this year to talk about what the clinical path will be for our macular degeneration program. We have our eyes, a little bit of a sideways thing, but we have our eye on some of the other competitors in the space that may have data. I think that for spinal cord injury, we have done a very nice job recently with the manufacturing. We've announced some of these, and so we're working to get back into the clinic. We're going to be testing a new way of delivering the cells, and so we have a couple of FDA engagements that we need to complete this year so that we can be prepared to go into the clinic. So we have a new protocol that we're going to do a small study to test that device that we think will be better than what was used in the past. And then we have an active oncology program. We have just one patient left to enroll. This is being done with our partnership through Cancer Research UK. They have just one patient left to enroll on that study. So we actually have quite a number of meaningful clinical events this year, and then even going into early next year. As I say, all of which we've got capital on hand to see through. So pretty good times for the company. And from an equity perspective, we've had a heck of a 12 months. We're finally, I think, starting to be noticed for our work, and I think appreciated for our work. And so we hope to continue that good run of success.
Well, that sounds like you've got a lot of milestones ahead to drive the stock and plenty of cash to get you there. Thank you very much, Brian. This has been a very interesting discussion. Look forward to following the company.
Thanks so much, Robert. It's been my pleasure, and I appreciate again the opportunity to talk about our work.
Thank you for joining us for this C-Suite interview presentation brought to you by channelchek. Visit our YouTube channel for more interview content, as well as virtual roadshows and conference presentation replays. New content is added regularly, so subscribe below to stay up to date. Visit channelchek.com or click the link in the description to access equity research, news, and advanced market data on this and the 6,000 other small and micro-cap companies listed.